If you listen to Trump talk, he some days is very optimistic about our prospects of winning the war. Other days, he and his advisors are very pessimistic. They're just sort of all over the place. And it's very hard to make sense of exactly what's going on. And I think the same thing is true with regard to the Ukrainians. There's no question that, number one, the Ukrainians have to spin a positive message to keep their own troops fighting. You remember, only about 25% of the Ukrainian population wants to continue this war. This war is no longer popular in Ukraine. Roughly 1/4 of the people want to continue the fight. The rest want to settle it. So Zelensky has to spin a positive story to keep his population on board, and also to continue to get success from the West, to convince the West that Ukraine is worth betting on. And he's especially concerned with keeping the United States in the fight. So you get this positive story for those reasons. But then point number two is, Zelensky is surely aware of what you and I have talked about many times, which is that Ukraine is not doing well on the battlefield, and it can't do very much with its long-range drone campaign, and that the longer this war goes on under the present circumstances, the worse Ukraine's situation gets. They surely understand that. They surely understand that every month they lose more territory. And they surely understand that the Russians become more aggressive in the air campaign as every month goes on. So I think in a very important way, he has an incentive to settle this one before the situation gets worse. I would bet a lot of money he understands that. And that explains the other narrative that comes from Zelensky and his aides. So you get these two sort of dueling narratives. And for people like us on the outside trying to make sense of what's going on, it's really very difficult. And I'm sure when we start talking about the war in Iran, there again, we'll have difficulty trying to make sense of exactly what's going on, because you have these dueling narratives and we don't have access to what's going on behind closed doors, which is what really matters, of course.
It does. And in fact, let's one more question on this topic before we shift, because it relates directly to what you're talking about with dueling narratives. And I wonder if you can just give me your best estimate for what in the hell is going on in the State Department when on June the 3rd, Secretary of State Marco Rubio goes before the Senate under testimony or under oath and says, we picked a side in this war. We picked Ukraine. We didn't pick Russia. We're not neutral mediators. We're trying to help them win the war. And then on around August the 3rd, so almost exactly 2 months later, he says, you know what? We're just trying to end this war. President Trump knows Zelensky, he knows Putin, and we're just trying to see if there any way that we can, maybe because of these long-range strikes, find some new evidence to bring the war to a conclusion. I mean, those are mutually exclusive messages, barely 60 days apart. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's perfectly appropriate for President Trump, Secretary of State, to making contradictory arguments on a frequent
basis.
Very
consistent, I guess, right?
I mean, he is Trump's right-hand man for foreign policy. And therefore, you would expect him to reflect the views of the president. And I think what's going on here is that Marco Rubio is reflecting President Trump's views.
But what is that? What is the rest of the world to think about this? What is Europe to think about this? What is Russia to think about this? When it's like, it depends on what day of the week we're talking about, what the American position even is. How does that affect our ability to either bring this war to a conclusion, the one in the Middle East, or really any kind of negotiations around the world?
I think that foreign leaders come to two conclusions. One is, you can't trust us. I think this is where the Russians are at, and it's where the Iranians are at, and for good reason. By the way, it's where the Europeans are at as well. You just can't trust the United States. But second, and more importantly, I think that most leaders around the world think we are dangerous, that we could end up blowing up the world. I don't think that's likely for 1 second, but it is possible that we could end up causing a major war beyond the 2 wars that are going on now, because I don't think we really know what we're doing. And
That's a pretty big understatement.
no, the fact you can say that that's an understatement speaks volumes about where we're at, if you really think about it. But I don't think the administration knows what it's doing with regard to Iran. And even in the case of Ukraine, if you go back to what Trump said he was going to do in terms of settling that war, and then what happened at Anchorage, and then you fast forward to where we are today, he's been all over the map. And he has certainly failed to shut down this war, despite the fact that he was deeply committed to doing that. And in fact, Danny, he has not even come close to shutting down this war. And again, I think this just says a great deal about his ability to execute foreign policy. I mean, I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but as you and I both know, if you're the president of the United States and you're trying to formulate and execute a coherent foreign policy, that has to be done in a very systematic or very rational legal way. You have to staff the problems that you face. You have to talk to all sorts of smart people who are with you or who are against you, so that you make sure that you understand exactly what you're up against. And then you want to make sure you dot every I and dot every T before you actually start a war, or you start on a path to end a war. You just have to act that way. Presidents in the past have acted that way, whether it was Joe Biden or Barack Obama, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton. We could just go back in time. They all had an apparatus in their administration that was designed to systematically analyze foreign policy decisions. They really did not fly by the seat of their pants. This is not to say they made smart decisions.
Yeah.
You and I know they often goofed big time. There's no question about that. But they at least studied the problem before they executed. But that's not the case at all here. And
No.
It's reflected very clearly in the decision to start this war.
And in fact, let me, that's a perfect transition point, but because now we're going to see some even lack of understanding of what is going on the inner circle for President Trump on the Iran war here. Let's start off with Keith Kellogg here, who himself has kind of been all over the map. He wanted to take Park Island. He wanted to go back and finish the job, and then following behind President Trump with his messaging, now he's kind of like saying, well, maybe we should try some diplomacy here. But even with that, this one from last night to where even that message is muddled.
A moderate in Iran happens to be that guy that he goes out to watch the execution of protesters, but he doesn't go to the leaked cocktail party afterwards.
Right.
But Pesheshkian is part of the mob.
Trump's kind of hinted even today that they might have to go back in. But it's almost like they want to present it in a way where it's like, look, we tried 50 times and they lied 50 times to be able to justify an extreme move in the future. Does that feel like part of the equation?
Yeah, it does. And I give President Trump full credit for this, and he's trying to have a diplomatic solution. But you reach a point when you say enough is enough.
But diplomatic, so what does that even mean, John? Because we had a diplomatic solution on June 17th, and then we botched that up with trying to insert something in paragraph 5, not following paragraph 1, and then we started this 13-day bombing campaign in the middle of it. What negotiated settlement are we even looking for right now?
Well, I mean, I think that those two gentlemen you just had on the screen are not. They're both. Their feet are not squarely placed in reality. I don't know what they're talking about. Just hard to understand what they're thinking. The idea that we're going to go back in, or are they serious? Do they really think that we have a military option here? Anyway, what are we talking about? As you said, we had a memorandum of understanding on 17 June, and we effectively walked away from that memorandum because, as you point out, we basically violated the fifth and the first articles of that memorandum, and then we engaged in this tit for tat campaign. And now what we want to do, apparently, is go back to the memorandum of understanding. There are some reports on the internet that the administration, the Trump administration, has approached the Iranian government about going back to the memorandum of understanding. The problem is we're not going to go back to the memorandum of understanding because the Iranians are going to drive a harder deal in terms of reaching any new memorandum of understanding. They're not going to be willing to go back to the 17th of June memorandum as it stands. They'll want a better deal. And they'll want a better deal because their situation today is better than it was in the run-up to the June 17th deal. In other words, what happened is we violated the June 17th deal. We got into this tit for tat campaign, and it didn't produce victory in any sense of that term. And in fact, we basically opted to end the tit for tat campaign because we could no longer carry it on given the weapons shortages that we have. The last thing we need is to continue the fighting given our shortage of weaponry. So the end result is we are really in an extremely difficult position at this point in time. The Iranians don't trust us, and they're going to drive a much harder bargain this time around.
Maintaining our common theme here, and as you so artfully put it here, feet not exactly planted in reality. President Trump doesn't seem to be on those. Gary, if we can play the one that we have lower on the cube there, Trump's still ready. He doesn't seem to be aware of any kind of limitations, even last night.
Totally obliterate everything, and that's where we were headed. And they wanted to negotiate, and we're doing that, and it seems to be working out quite well.
What makes you think this will be different? Because they tend to never.
It may be and may not be. I think that the threat of this, this was more than a threat. We were ready to go. And, in life, they know when you're ready to go and when you're just bluffing. No, we were ready to go. And we are ready to go. We have to do that.
And we are ready to go, says he. However, a lot of news has been out here lately that virtually all of our long-range precision missiles are running short, whether that's the THAAD, the PAC-3 interceptors, the Tomahawk cruise missiles, JASSMs, even some of the ATACMs and PSM missiles as well. But President Trump himself, in a Truth Social a little after midnight last night, says the U.S. has massive amounts of munitions, especially certain types. I don't know what certain types he's talking about, but whatever. And anyway, additionally, large amounts are being manufactured and shipped as needed, blah, blah, blah. So what he says is, yeah, I don't worry about any of that stuff. Should he?
Of course. This is poppycock. Right? First of all, it looks like we have expended, according to almost all reports, virtually all of our ATACMs and PRISMs, 50% of our Tomahawks. Then if you look at our inventory of THAADs, we've expended 80% of our THAADs and 65% of our Patriot interceptors. This is truly remarkable. Uh, and there are all sorts of reports in a variety of media outlets that Trump reamed Pete Hegseth out at a meeting this past Friday for failing to tell him that we had decimated the inventory to the levels I just described. And this just shows you that Trump is fully aware of the problem that we face. Now, he says we can replace these weapons. He's living in a dream world. We don't have that industrial base, as we were talking about before. It takes years to replace. It's going to take years to replace all these missiles. So we are in deep trouble. And this is one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons that he did not attack this past Friday, despite the fact that he said he was going to attack. We don't have the weapons. And if you want to, you just also want to think about what attacking would look like. We would attack, would be a massive attack, he says. And anytime you hear the word massive, that means you're going to use up a lot of missiles and a lot of bombs. And we just said we don't have a lot of missiles, and we don't even have a lot of bombs, okay? And furthermore, the Iranians are not going to throw up their hands right away. So this massive offensive is going to turn into a protracted offensive. And you remember the first offensive, the 40-day war? Think of that, 40 days. Apparently, there were about 13,000 targets that we went after. Iran is a target-rich environment, fighting a massive war over a protracted period of time when you don't have many weapons to begin with. I want to know how that one works.
Yeah, in fact, that was underscored in this recent interview with a guy named Colonel Hamilton, who was talking about the Patriots. Now, in the first part of this clip, I'll just kind of give you a trigger warning. He's going to make some claims about what these weapons can do and how effective they actually are. But then in the second part of it, it's going to get a little bit more real.
The Patriot really is the only system made in large numbers that has the capability to knock down Russian ballistic missiles effectively at high rates. And then secondly, our European partners and allies, some of them have the Patriot, but they have even fewer remaining than the U.S. does because they have given so many to Ukraine in the early years of the war. Is that the U.S. has expended so many Patriot missiles in the Gulf War, the war against Iran. The numbers I'm seeing are from about 2,330 before the war, we're down to about 800 right now. So we've expended almost 2/3 of our Patriots. We don't have them to give because we need them. The U.S. has got to preserve them for other theaters, for the Middle East, for the Indo-Pacific, as well as for Europe. So therefore, we've even been diverting missiles that our European partners and allies had bought and paid for to restock U.S. supplies.
So you see there, number one, he claims they're really effective, and all evidence says that they're barely effective. But anyway, he does point out that globally, it's not just what's happening in the Middle East. It's not even just what's happening in the European theater of operations, but globally, we're running out of them. What possible rationale would you have for President Trump to go back in to listen to these generals like General Kellogg, General Keane, et cetera, go back in and, quote, finish the job when the only job we might finish is running out of what little we have?
Well, I'm not sure at this point in time that he's listening to Keane or to Pete Hegseth, for that matter, or to Keith Kellogg. I think at this point in time, President Trump understands what's going on. You know, Danny, I noticed the other day that there's talk now in the Pentagon about placing greater emphasis on tactical nuclear weapons for dealing with Russia and China. As soon as I read the stories making that point clear, I said, this is probably because we've expended so many conventional weapons that we feel that our conventional deterrence in East Asia and in Europe has diminished to the point where we have to rebalance the deterrence equation and put much more emphasis on nuclear deterrence. So that's why I think they're now talking about using tactical nuclear weapons. Well, which just shows you how much trouble we're in.
Well, yeah, it really does. And that's kind of concerning too, for multiple reasons. But then, why do we want to go down a path here? I mean, what logic can you ascertain from a recognition of the missile inventories and then the realization that could then require us to put a greater emphasis on tactical nuclear weapons, which would potentially be catastrophic and get into an exchange that would see tens of millions of Americans potentially killed? Why would you want to continue going down that path instead of saying, okay, you know what, let's just get a fig leaf, a fake victory, whatever, and get out of here? Why will we not do that?
Well, I believe they're going to try to do that in Iran. I mean, I think that Trump and company are searching for a negotiated settlement. There's not a lot of clear evidence in the public domain to support what I just said, but you can see snippets of information that have leaked out from the administration that indicate that they're talking to the Iranians and they want to go back to the 17 June memorandum. And it makes perfect sense from their point of view. So I think we're trying to get out of the war against Iran. And the question you have to ask yourself is, can we do that? And with regard to Ukraine, Trump has been trying to shift the burden of dealing with Ukraine to the Europeans. He wants the Europeans to do the heavy lifting on that front. And he is also interested in reducing the American military footprint in Europe. The problem Trump faces is that he just made a massive blunder by attacking Iran. It's a losing war. It'll undoubtedly go down as the greatest strategic disaster in American military history, outdoing even the Iraq War. And he's going to have a devil of a time getting out of this war. It's not like he can just snap his finger and end it. And I would surmise, Danny, that what's going to happen here over the next couple months is that he's going to be faced with two losing wars. He's going to be seen, or we're going to be seen to have lost to Russia in Ukraine, and we're going to be seen to have lost to Iran in the Middle East. And on top of all of that, if you look at the Palestinian issue, the genocide continues in Gaza, and the Israelis are on a rampage, not only in the West Bank, but in southern Lebanon. And Trump has got this board of peace, and it's supposed to do all sorts of wondrous things vis-a-vis the Israelis, and it's failed. And there's no evidence that Trump is going to be able to get Netanyahu or any replacement of Netanyahu to change Israel's basic policies on the West Bank, in Gaza, and in southern Lebanon. So Trump has failed on almost every front, and more people are beginning to realize that.
We don't actually have sponsors, and there's a reason for that, because we don't want to have to hit you over the head with a bunch of ads. Hit that like button, and of course, share this with somebody you love.